So it's really just taking the good bits of those frameworks and approaches and making them faster and much more effective.
Welcome to the Fractional Edge podcast, the ultimate podcast where we unlock the power of workforce planning and discuss the rapidly growing fractional executive staffing strategies to supercharge your business.
Meet your hosts, Carol Fraser, a workforce planning expert, fractional chief human resources officer, and founder of C4 Talent.
And Jason Huett, the sensei of marketing, fractional chief marketing officer, and founder of Fifth Degree Marketing.
We'll bring you insights from seasoned pros, inspiring success stories, and actionable strategies to optimize your valued workforce.
Don't miss this chance to upgrade your business with top industry leaders in today's competitive landscape. So tune in and learn how to unleash your competitive edge. Hello and welcome to the Fractional Edge. This is your podcast talking about workforce planning and fractional executives as your strategic differential to create a competitive edge. My name is Carol Fraser. I am a workforce planning expert, your co-host and a fractional CHRO. My co-host today, Jason Huett, who is a sensei of marketing and a fractional CMO. And today we have Emma as our guest. Emma, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Carol. So similar to Jason, I am a fractional CMO. My name is Emma Westley, and I am based in Europe, currently in France, although my clients, the companies that I work with, are global, based everywhere. And I have been a fractional CMO or a similar guise for about 5 years now, after just over 15 years in a number of corporate, big company, corporate positions and more traditional marketing positions.
Excellent. And what is your background that moved you from maybe full-time work or whatever it was you were doing beforehand over to being a fractional CMO?
So yeah, as I mentioned, I did about 15, 16 years corporate marketing and worked my way up through various different marketing positions. Worked for the likes of HP, Symantec, Accenture, so big corporate brands. And I'll be honest, the time that I worked with those companies, I struggled. I got frustrated with the pace of things and not being able to affect change very quickly, and politics. So I then moved about 5 years ago into a startup. Went and worked for my very first startup and loved it. I was their global CMO. Unfortunately, that startup didn't go anywhere. It was one of the 90% that fail. But it gave me that taste for working with startups and smaller companies and a much faster pace of change and transformation. And so I then moved into, at that time, it was freelance consultancy, working for other startups and small, medium-sized businesses. And it's really progressed from there. And what I do now is a combination of fractional marketing, so the clients that I do work with long-term, and then also consulting, sort of time-bound projects that I do with those companies. And I specialize in B2B. I have done B2B my whole career, worked with tech companies, SaaS companies, and I tend to focus now again on B2B, but early stage companies, usually between sort of 1 and 20 million in revenue, and either with a tech focus or with a service lens as well, so more service-based companies.
Emma, I'm really curious. I'm really excited about this podcast episode, mainly because our backgrounds are some parallels. But I'm very curious your experience in the corporate world, and we'll focus most of this kind of on what you're doing today. But from the corporate world of marketing, what were some of the big takeaways, the lessons that you learned that you're applying to your clients now?
So it's interesting. I would balance it like 50% of lessons I took from corporate and 50% I threw away. So what I mainly took from the corporate was the frameworks. So how you would structure your thinking when you were thinking about marketing, how to approach a marketing strategy, some elements of, working with internal teams, how to get alignment, buy-in, that sort of stuff. Even though there was a lot of politics, a lot of that was, good education, good learnings. But what I did was I took all of those frameworks and basically condensed them into much more accelerated processes and frameworks or methodologies that are much more suited for startups. So startups that need to pivot, for example, if they're changing their strategy from, year 1 to year 2, or they just need something that's a lot faster, it doesn't take months in a planning cycle to get done. So it's really just taking the good bits of those frameworks and approaches and making them faster and much more effective. And personally, I gel better with that approach because I work at a quite a strong, fast pace. And so getting things done, I think it's a trait of the fractional, actually, is getting things done, and getting things done quickly is much more, it's much more in line with the businesses I work with, and also the stage of company that they're at.
We've heard that time and time again from guests. Yeah, people that are involved in fractional work love just the pace that you can move at, which is typically much faster than you can in a large company. Talking
with other fractionals, I think it is definitely a trait of people who are attracted to this type of work, is you've got that pace, but also working across different clients. So you can much more easily, take learnings from one client into another and vice versa. And you also have that time for yourself to research new ideas, look into new platforms or tools or strategies, that sort of thing. And that all sort of blends together really well into this fractional approach.
I'm really curious, when you start working with a new client, can you outline the process that you take clients through? I'm just kind of curious what that looks like, maybe the first month or so.
Sure. So I do tend to work with clients initially on a consulting basis. I know that's not how every fractional works, but it usually forms some sort of an audit. So I'm auditing their current marketing. For much earlier stage companies, there's not necessarily a lot to audit, but it could be looking at their positioning and saying, okay, well, is this positioning working? Is your target audience strategy working? And how does that need to adjust? But there'll be some form of audit, on a differential scale of either small audit or large audit, depending on where the company is. And then, but doing that very, very quickly. So, that's not, I don't take months and months to do that and then come back with a 50-page slide deck of recommendations. I'll do that very, very quickly and come up with a very focused set of recommendations. I'm all about focus for how I work, but also the clients that I work with. And so it'll be coming back with that focused set of recommendations to say, this is what you need to focus on at the moment, and put in place those foundations that you can then build on. But I have, I've got lots of sayings that I'll use with clients. So things like, don't get distracted by, the next shiny object, but also there are so many things out there that you could do. You don't need to do them, especially, in the marketing world. There are so many different channels, so many different campaigns. Don't get distracted by all those things. Focus on what you need to focus on for your target audience and your business.
Yeah, it makes sense. There's incredible number of tactics and shiny distractions these days in marketing.
Absolutely. Yes.
So Emma, I'm curious, you said that you go in as a consultant and then I guess de facto you pivot to fractional. And I know that you talk a lot about the definitions of fractional against other kinds of working relationships. Can you go a little into what that is for our listeners to better understand the benefits of each?
Sure. So we all know what part-time is. I think that's a very common phrase, been around for probably as long as work has existed, or at least corporate work. So I would say for anybody trying to understand what fractional is it's part-time, but with two major differences. The first of those differences is it's a senior level hire. So part-time can obviously be at any level, but fractional is typically at a senior level, an executive level, or director level or above. And then the other big difference is a part-time hire is still on your payroll usually. You're still covering some degree of overhead for that person, whether it's health benefits or pension or something like that. With a fractional, you don't have any of that. The fractional is independent in terms of the financial aspect. You don't have to cover even the cost of their equipment or their pension contributions or anything like that. But that doesn't mean that they're not a part of your team. And this is, I think, where companies are maybe struggling a little bit, because a fractional is very much committed to your business and committed to being part of your team. And it takes a little bit of a mindset shift to get to understand that, because you can be committed to multiple companies at the same time. You just, fractionals have a way of sort of switching and being just as committed to one company as they are to another. And they're committed to making your company work, making your marketing, for example, work, and being a part of your team, being embedded in that team. Personally, I think it's a new way of things, and it will take time for companies and individuals to get used to this. But it is where the future of work is, because we're all living so much longer, and we all want much more flexibility out of life. And equally on the company side, companies need more flexibility. Again, if I think to the type of company that I work with, who are very often pivoting from one thing to the next, they can't afford to invest in full-time senior staff that are maybe not the right skill sets for them, from one year to the next. So this fractional approach gives them that flexibility to have a consistent point of contact, someone who's, at a senior level, strategic head, but then tapping into other skill sets as and when they need to, if they need to change direction. There's a lot in there that I've covered, so I probably need to unpick certain elements, but that to me is in a nutshell what fractional is at the moment.
It's when you think about it from the workforce planning portion, what I usually tend to say is don't try to Frankenstein a bunch of components of others' jobs into one and think that you're going to go find a unicorn. It seems that a more strategic workforce plan is to find fractional executives who each one of them, it's their magic to have a breadth and depth of that component, as opposed to, like you said, hiring someone where they may not be able to do the full scope of what they need, because you tend to hire somebody who has a specialty, or at least even if they're a generalist, they're usually better at one area than the next, right? And by doing these fractional executives, you're able to get the best in each one of those components so that you can actually see more value and impact quicker than trying to ramp up somebody where that's just not their magic. So when you think about what you do maybe versus what Jason does, because similar to my realm of human resources, there's so many different components within marketing. What is your magic area within marketing?
I would say it's especially helping that early stage of company find their target audience. And that sounds very simple. And if you have the experience of doing it, it can be quite simple in terms of, right, this is the approach that we're going to take to do this and focus on the right things. But that means lots of components going into that. So, it's defining that target audience, defining your proposition, putting in place all the foundations that you need to then reach that target audience, focusing on the right channels to reach that target audience, engaging with them in the right way, following a sales process to nurture them, all those sorts of things. So it's not just, finding the audience, but it's proving that that's the right audience to go with. And then the other thing is that I do is put in place the foundations that are needed for a company to scale. So there's a little bit of a balance, especially in B2B, with finding channels that don't scale. So, sales channels, for example, by their very nature, are not hugely scalable. And then finding marketing channels that support that approach. And especially, I mentioned, I work with quite a lot of service-based companies, and service-based companies are quite unique in that they can't necessarily go straight into a volume demand gen approach. They have to get that balance right between sales, human-led sales, and some degree of marketing to support that. And that's where my sort of magic is getting that balance right. I'm not afraid to admit that, from where I stand, marketing is a support function to sales. It's not this massive revenue driver that it can be in other types of B2B companies. So it is a support function, albeit a very important one, because you're building the brand, you're getting the reputation out there, you're making sure that the tone of voice is correct, and as I say, that you're hitting that right audience. But it's about putting in place those foundations as well, so that when the company comes to scale, they can do that based on the right processes, etc.
I'm really curious, Emma. Have you found? I know a lot of the clients I work with, when I first get involved, they think very tactically, and I think tactics are easier to think through because everyone knows what LinkedIn ads or those tools might be. But I'm kind of curious, where are you seeing the most benefit or the most success in terms of channels for B2B? Do you have any recommendations for the CEOs that might be listening out there for channels they should be considering?
Well, yeah, the first answer would be there's not one size fits all. I started working with a company, a brilliant company in the US, actually, a couple of years ago. And I was going into that company thinking, LinkedIn ads and other things I'd used in a B2B context. And this company we tried the LinkedIn ads and it did not work. It really did not. And so their channels have been a lot of people would say a bit more traditional, events, relationship building, networking, that sort of stuff. So if I took that example and said, right, well, I'll apply that to another B2B company, that might not work. And so unfortunately, I would have to say it depends. It does depend on the type of company, the type of message. What I would say is, though, that maybe not a channel, but the strategy that sits just above the channel that is working for B2B is brand at the moment, is building a brand and a relationship and a reputation. And call that demand gen, maybe call that just brand awareness. It's sort of in between, as I said, that sits between a strategy and a channel, and it's really building a relationship with your audience and communicating to them what your difference is, what your USP is, and making them feel like they're special as well as a customer, as an audience. And then, the specific channels that would sit under that, obviously, are where your audience are. I always say, go to where your audience are. Don't bring them to you, because you'll work, 100 times more trying to do that and spend a lot of money, probably not winning. So yeah, I know that's probably not the answer that a lot of companies want to hear. They just want the quick, oh yeah, LinkedIn works, or yeah, TikTok works, or it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. So the big takeaway there is it does depend. There's not a cookie cutter answer, but it starts with strategy and then flows to channel and tactics afterwards, which makes complete sense. Yeah, I like that. Thanks for sharing and getting specific.
Still on the specifics, I'd love to hear, and I'm sure our audience would, what could you give us a success story of one of your clients?
Yeah, so I've got a few, and they're all very different as well, which is nice. So as I said earlier, when I first started working like this, it wasn't fractional. I was sort of freelance consultant, but there was a company that I worked with for quite a long time. It was a product design agency, and they'd got really, really good traction, and had built up a really, really good team and a lot of really good intelligence in the team as well. But they were struggling to scale. And so I went in and, as I said, defined their target audience, really looked at how to reach that target audience on a very, very focused basis. But as I've just said about, the tactics and the channels, they didn't actually need a massive marketing strategy. All they needed were some foundations that straddled marketing and sales, and that supported their sales team to enable them to be a little bit more volume based, but not hugely more, because, as I say, their USP was very much in their team, and frankly, they were going to hit a ceiling on how big they could get to. So yeah, I worked with them over quite a long period of time, just putting in place those foundations and making sure that the sales team at least had the structure and support that they needed. But yeah, I eventually finished with them because it was like, well, you don't need a marketing function. You don't need a CMO. You're now ready to scale this in line with the company. But that to me was a success story, because it was still giving them what they needed to grow to a certain point at that time. A couple of other success stories. So I worked last year and the year before with a very early stage AI company. And again, that was really, really focusing on who was their target audience, how they needed to position themselves as a very technical team, and getting them to the point where they were then able to get investment. So they secured investment, and are now actually hiring in more into the technical side of the business to scale from there. And then a completely different one again, as I mentioned before, this US company that I've been working with for a couple of years now. So when I started working with them, they were at about 5 million revenue, and they're now between 20-25 million. And that has been, again, that it's a service-based company, but it's been putting in place the support that the sales team have needed, building a brand that their customers will refer on. So that's one of their big growth channels, and a brand that people will recognize and talk about in their industry. And that one in particular, the team has grown a lot, and it's been so nice, from the financials speak for themselves, but it's been so nice seeing the team grow as well, and a real culture coming with that too.
I'm curious, for the companies that you're working with, how often do you get a chance to influence the hiring for the marketing team specifically? Now we're stepping into Carol's territory a little bit, so I definitely want to hear her thoughts too.
Very much an influence, especially those early stage hires. There's quite a few companies that I've worked with over the past few years where it's been my responsibility to bring in those first marketing hires, and either bring them in at a slightly more junior level and then continue to manage them or mentor them, or take a step back and say, right, this is the sort of person that you need to bring in now to manage your growth, or be it at a slightly, that's sort of mid-management level. And yeah, I'll be honest, I this is what I like about Fractional is, okay, I'm committed, I'm embedded in companies for 1-2 years maybe, but I'm not there for 5-10 years. I don't want to do that, and I don't think that's where I add value. So at the right point in time, then yes, you need to bring in someone that maybe is that full-time hire, or at least someone who will take the business on to the next stage, basically.
I love how you said you know where that pivot point is, where your value and impact is the greatest, and then where it's going to start to diminish, and then it should kind of flip over to a different kind of resource. That level of awareness, I think, is really important for our listeners to understand. When you're trying to do your workforce planning and really think about today's needs, strategic goals, and objectives, and what it's going to look like in 3 years or 5 years, it's an iterative process. And to bring somebody in who can really bring the greatest value and impact, and whether that's 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week, whatever that may be, and the ability to ebb and flow with a fractional executive based on timelines and KPIs. That is what I think our listeners need to understand. It's not about hiring somebody full time. It's not about hiring somebody junior and leveling them up. To level them up, Rick, is a whole other job. It's not just the tactical and strategic components of that specialty, right? Marketing, but it's a whole, now you've got to level up that person if you decide to go call it on the more frugal route. And you had been talking a little bit about teams in a couple of ways. And I'm curious, when you are starting to, is there a tipping point in a company's life cycle where you believe that, it's best to start out with a fractional executive, and at a certain tipping point, whether that be revenue, whether that be reach, whatever that case may be, that you start to see, okay, now we need to bring in this level, that level, the other level?
Yeah, so I think this depends on the type of fractional as well. So I know there are plenty of fractionals out there that will work with, annual revenue companies of 50 million to 70 million, or even above that, if they're real proper scale up sort of companies. Personally, I prefer as I've mentioned, that earlier stage, the like 1 to 20 million. And so again, personally, I'll know that once it's getting, I think the flags for me are once it's starting to creep beyond, for example, a 2 to 3 day a week commitment. So it is starting to get into that full time, and it needs a senior level person full time as well. So it's not like I can stay at a fractional senior level and it'll be someone else that just needs to come in full time at a more junior or mid management level. That's experience that will tell you that is, you just know that, you cannot cover all the work and you need to be more invested time wise in the company. So that would be one of my flags. And then the other flag is maybe that the company is just going in a different direction. And as I mentioned before, companies that I've worked with where they don't actually need a full-time or a senior marketing person, be that on a fractional basis or a full-time basis. And maybe they'll need that in, 5 to 10 years when they come back and have got, to a further growth stage. But yeah, there is that element of actually this is not where you need this level of senior support. And so stepping away from that as well. I think each company is quite unique. There's so many different factors that go into that, and you don't really know about all those factors until you're in a company. So, and that's the beauty of working as a fractional for the business as well, is that you can get into the real machinations of the company and understand what are those factors, what are those push and pull factors, the human factors, the technology factors that are all inputting to that, and then assess, what does this company need in terms of resource? Because it's not going to be the same as, another company that looks the same. A lot of, I just saw a thing on LinkedIn earlier, in the B2B world, a lot of companies model themselves on SaaS companies. And it's a bit of a trap that a lot of B2Bs have gotten into, is they look at SaaS and they go, oh, right, yeah, we follow that playbook, that model. And, right, our first hire needs to be this, and then we build this way, and then we bring in this person. And that's not necessarily always going to be the case. You do have to take it on a case-by-case basis and work out what is best for that company. And then the other thing that factors in is obviously investment. I personally work mostly with organically built businesses, but, is there VC investment or PE investment that is driving the growth of the company? And so that throws in a whole other set of things to deal with as well.
Yeah. Well, Emma, I'm kind of curious, if a CEO is watching right now, what advice do you have for them to start working with a fractional CMO? I guess, one is, how do they go about selecting the right fractional CMO, would be the first question. And then the second kind of follow-up is, what advice can you give them during that initial kind of, 1 or 2 months of onboarding?
So again, this new mindset that I think CEOs have to get into, the first thing of working with a fractional is just try it, because there's no commitment. There's, okay, there may be contracts that certain fractionals will put in place that, you need to try things for a certain number of months to work out if there's a fit. But it's a lot less commitment than, bringing on someone full time, and then, they're having on board for 1 to 3 months and then actually plan and whatever. So yeah, try it and see, especially if your budgets are tight or you're not quite sure what sort of a skill set you need as well. If you're thinking, right, I know I need a marketing person, but I don't know what area it is I need to focus on. Then a fractional can come in and define that area for you, and be that point of consistency. So yeah, first thing is just try it and see, and then going forward, working with a fractional. I think there's 3 key things. I think first of all is the focus. Is be focused, and let focus be a positive thing for your business, because I've worked in such big corporate companies where they weren't focused. They were working on things for months, or they were oh, this campaign and that campaign, and oh, we have to do this marketing piece of work, and it's so all over the place. So let that fractional focus you on what you need to do for your business. And then connected to that is learn to be stricter with owners and deadlines. So again, something that bigger companies are not good at. But let the fractional guide on what your deadlines and what your who owners need to be, and stick to those. Again, a lot of other fractionals that I've worked with, we wouldn't say that we crack a whip as such, but we're pretty strict on this needs to be done by this date, and this is who's going to own that task, who's going to do the elements that make it up, and that combined with the focus element are really, really powerful for especially high growth businesses, and that's how you'll get the most out of your fractional. And then I think the third thing is recognize that you're hiring a fractional with a lot of experience. It's a senior level hire, so respect that experience and respect that they've probably done, if not exactly the same thing, but something similar in the past. And so they're bringing that experience. And, one of the reasons that they can start from day one and they can get going is that they've tried these things before. They know what works, what doesn't. And okay, there might be slight tweaks to it depending on your business context, but respect that experience and know that if they're not doing something, it's because there's a reason for that. Or if they're, if they're choosing not to put something into your strategy, it's not that they've not thought about it, it's because they've thought about it and they know it won't necessarily work. So yeah, that respecting that experience and acknowledging that that's what you're hiring for, that's what you're hiring in.
Yeah, so you're getting not just a great strategy and executional plan, but you're avoiding all the mistakes, the very painful mistakes that fractional CMOs already made. So it's pretty invaluable.
Mm-hmm.
And the component of, don't try to fix it yourself, right? Leverage those who do have the experience, the brain trust, the continuing staying abreast of the competitive aspects of the market. CEOs and even those who are heads of portfolios who are part of the PE firms, it's really hard to stay abreast of every different component within an organization. And these fractional executives can honestly help you kind of come into it with, what's it going to cost you if you don't fix this problem? Or what's it going to cost you if you don't understand this deeper aspect of, what we're bringing into the fold? It's many times they see the issues or they see the need, but they don't do the full holistic look of, what is it going to cost me to bring you in versus what's it really going to cost me if I don't bring you in. So I think those are some of the things that, when marketing, and I speak kind of from my own personal experiences, it's a very different world today. Every day it's a very different world. You had mentioned AI at one point, but it's constantly changing every single day. And when you're a full-time W-2 employee at some of these companies, you're hyper-focused on the administration, the socialization, the elements of being in the fold of everything of that organization. And sometimes you can't really find the time to go, oh, so something brand new came out yesterday and I didn't even know that. It's hard. Where the fractional executive, that's what we do. We do stay on top of all the trends, all the changes, and that's why we can bring that value and impact much quicker to the organization. So, Emma, I'm curious, what was one question you wish we would have asked you so we can talk about it?
So I actually got asked this on another podcast recently, and I thought it was quite a good question because it's maybe something I take for granted. It was around, as a fractional, how I switch between different clients. And I've been thinking about it quite a bit. And I think, first of all, I've spent quite a lot of years working agency side. And that was a really good grounding in working across multiple clients. And, different team personalities and different demands and deadlines and all that sort of thing. Albeit that it's very chaotic, obviously, when you're in an agency, meeting the demands of the agency and then also meeting the demands of multiple clients as well. And I think the other thing that I've developed over the past few years is visual cues. So getting my head into different client cultures and different team cultures by visually using different tools. So, for example, I'll use Asana and Microsoft Teams for one client because those are the tools that they use. And so I can, cognitively think, right, that's that client. And this is the culture that I'm now in and how I need to behave on the meetings and all that sort of thing. And then another client, I'll work in Google Docs and, maybe have an actual, old fashioned notepad for writing notes on. And And so that's, a different vibe, and I'll adjust to that. And then for my own business development, my own sort of work, I'll use maybe Trello or something. So, and again, maybe a different notepad with a different color page or something like that. And it sounds really, maybe even a bit silly, but that visual cue of moving from, this look and feel, and, culture to a different one. And maybe it's the marketer in me as well, is, thinking, having a different sort of vibe for each one. And so, I know that we're talking to businesses here, but I'd say for fractionals, maybe interested in becoming a fractional or anything, that certainly has worked for me. And I know it's a concern of people going into fractional. Oh my goodness, how am I going to cover all these different clients? And equally for the businesses, thinking, well, how are they going to cover all these different companies at the same time? It is possible. It's very possible. You just have to get your tricks to do it.
I love that tip. The color piece of that's really interesting, and I think kind of the magic in that is you're adapting to the client's needs. So the golden rule of do unto others as you'd want to be done unto. One of my coaches said it's a platinum rule. It's do unto others as they would want to be done unto, and I think you've done a wonderful job of applying that. I can tell you're a very organized marketer just from talking with you.
Yeah. That is that whip that gets cracked. It's probably cracked mostly on myself more than anybody else. But I love it. Yeah, you have to find what works for you. But there's so many tools out there now to help. So there's no excuse.
I love it. Absolutely. And where can people find you online, Emma?
So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So Emma Westley. I think it's just the linkedin.com/Emma Wesley. And then my website is emerge.io. So that's IMMERJ.io. And if anybody's interested, that word emerge comes from ideas emerging, that whole sort of, brainstorm concept, but just in a slightly different spelling format. Those are the two main channels that I'll use and that people can find me on.
Excellent. Well,
Awesome.
Emma, thank you so much. We want to thank our listeners for listening to this podcast with Emma. And we want you to subscribe and share and keep spreading the word that for your company to really have the competitive advantage that it's looking for, leaning in to fractional executives as part of your workforce planning is really what helps to give your company the competitive edge and a whole lot quicker results with more value and impact. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
We hope you enjoyed our insightful discussions and feel inspired to unleash your competitive edge.
Remember to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with the latest episodes. You can also connect with our podcast guests to benefit from their expertise and explore collaboration opportunities by visiting our website, thefractionaledge.com. Join us next time as we continue to explore the power of workforce planning and fractional executives in today's competitive business landscape. Until then, take care and keep growing.